Well, hello, everybody. It looks like we made it today, and I'm so glad you're here. I see Kay Cotan has made it with us, and I bet in just a moment, there's Blake. Blake Bradford joins us as well. We're really glad you're here. Blake and Kay, I'm going to tell you something I've learned about people who do webinars a lot, which would include all these district superintendents joining us today. They do not come early. They do not come early. So we gave them just that. Matter of fact, I'd say about half the people who registered actually wrote to me and said, hey, can I just get the video to watch later? And I said, oh yeah, we'll send everybody a video. So I'd say most of our people will actually be watching you on a recording later. But I'm glad we've got a group with us here today as well. And I'm sure more will be popping on over the next few minutes. How are you guys doing?
Really great. Everything's great in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Doing well. Thanks, Kevin.
Well, you'll be glad to know that your screens are clear. I don't see any internet delay, so everything seems to be going okay. You're going to be talking to us about the simplified account, the structure today, what we call SAS sometimes. I'm sure that you're going to tell us some things that you probably haven't talked to us about in the past when we have these forums. Is that right?
We sure are, and really emphasize some things, particularly for district superintendents.
Yeah, well, that's great. And I'm sure that's why everybody came today. Well, I'm going to go ahead and hit my magic button here. And I believe Blake's going to run the slideshow today. So Blake, I'm going to turn things over to you, and you should see something popping up on your screen just about now.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're glad that you were able to join us either live or the recording. Blake and I have been so privileged to be able to now be on our third rendition of Mission Possible. And we just continue to find that this model is evolving in the local church level, but also there are many districts that are now simplifying and even our conferences. But we continue to find ways to equip at the local and also at the district superintendent level, because you're partners in the local church in helping them start in a healthy way. So today, we just wanted to offer some additional resources to help you in your district superintendent work, especially when it comes to simplified accountable structure in this charge conference season. So for today, we have several things that we wanted to cover with you, including just the discernment steps in the process. This is kind of a new piece, Blake, that we have added right over the last year, because we were finding that churches were really trying to hurry it up, and we intentionally have found that we need to slow that down and make sure that this is the right process at the right time. We'll talk more about that. We're going to talk about the touch points in the consultation process for the DS and give you some tools in that, and why we believe it's a healthy process to have multiple steps in the voting, and why and how all of that works. We're even going to share a sample resolution for adopting simplified accountable structure today, and also a conference nominations form specifically for SAS. And then we have even some additional bonus resources for you today. So we have a full agenda. So should we get started?
Oh, we probably ought to.
Absolutely.
We probably need to give everyone a quick reminder on what simplified accountable structure is, because I know from our conversations when we visit with folks, everyone is coming with different sorts of experiences that led up to today. And that includes experiences with simplified accountable structure, either as in your current job as a superintendent, which as a fellow superintendent in the middle of what in our conference we're doing check-ins, and I'm doing church visits, and I'm getting charge conference packets for 125 churches, and it's like, woo. But everyone's meeting this different place, and some of us have a memory of it from what it was a decade ago, and it has evolved. And so let's be really clear what we're talking about. The first thing is, this comes from 247.2 of the discipline. Notice in red, in consultation with and approval of the district superintendent. And what I love about that sentence, it has consultation and approval. And we actually talk about that later on as different pieces. It doesn't have to be all at once. Consultation's not sending me an email and saying, hey, I can do this next week, right? So anyway, we'll get into that. But that allows us a lot of flexibility. The one thing the discipline did not give us, though, is any kind of way to go about this well. And so that's what Mission Possible is about, how to do this really well. And so our recommendation is one leadership board of 9 people. They wear all multiple hats, all 9. And they meet with the pastor, but those 9 elected members, sometimes they're having on the ad council hat, and sometimes staff parish hat or finance hat or trustees hat. And they switch hats depending on the subject matter in front of them. And at times, I mean, you're kind of like wearing a stack of hats, because it for your toolbox, sometimes you're using some staffing solutions, and sometimes it's the financial issues or facility. You're being holistic, and that's one of the really wonderful things about simplified accountable structures: holistic solutions to complicated problems and opportunities and challenges and God's mission. We always say here, we want to be real clear, nominations committee and existing ministry teams all continue. What we're talking about is the governance committees, the administrative stuff. So Kay, how do you number all these? I mean, how do you get 9 people to do all this?
Right. So just to be clear too, there were some models previously that had maybe more than 9, right? We recommend 9. Truly, if you have more than 9, there will be some people that shouldn't be voting, right? Because there's a maximum in the Book of Discipline for SPRC and trustees of 9. And so if you have more than 9, technically some of those shouldn't be voting. So 3 classes of 3 people, cleanest, easiest way, right? And of those 9, 1 is named board chair, 1 is lay member, 1 is lay leader. We recommend that the board chair is named by the nominations committee. And that is because one of the things that is part of the new toolbox is really from the very beginning is to go back to that nominations committee and equip them in a different way. And so they're going to have the best insights through their discernment process. And it isn't like, let's throw darts at the pictorial and figure out, who we're going to get to say yes to the leadership roles. But this really is about spiritual maturity, who's really living out their discipleship. It's those kind of conversations and the leadership development process that is part of the equipping for nominations and setting expectations for new leaders that is part of this shift in culture of leadership as well. And so because of that, we recommend that the nominations committee names that chair. And we also recommend that that lay leader is also the chair, as well as the SPRC liaison to the district superintendent. If you have a chartered UMM and UMW, they can be part of those 9, but they go through the same discernment of nominations as everyone else. Youth could be a part of that as well. But again, if they are under the age of 18, anything of legal consequences, they would not be able to vote on because they're not of legal age.
Sure. And now, I mean, this is our recommendation. Kay, I'll tell you, yesterday, a colleague of mine, another DS, she sent me a screenshot of kind of someone wanting approval of their structure, and it was pretty exotic. I'll just tell you, it was I've never seen anything quite like it before. And we kind of talked back and forth. We said, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of learning yet to be had before we're ready to pull the trigger. So we kind of talked about, hey, next year, because all the disciplinary rules, qualifications, responsibilities for every committee, staff parish, finance, trustees, church council, all those rules still apply, because all those rules, all those committees still exist. They just exist in these 9 people. And for some people, that's like an algebra problem. You have to have a certain number of men and women. There's all these rules, but you have to follow all the rules. And so, we kind of looked at it and scratched our head. Oh golly, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board here with this team, because they didn't do that math that leads up to that. And the more exotic you get, off the recommendations, the more math you have to do.
Right,
And
right.
really start, why? Or are we
Yeah,
doing, why are we going off book?
exactly. And that's what, you mentioned earlier, in the Book of Discipline, it's so generic. And so that's what allows all of this flexibility. And that's great. But on the other hand, that flexibility leads us to, as one conference refers to it, as the Wild West. But then we aren't in compliance. So while sometimes people it sounds pretty stringent the way that you all recommend and teach it, it's because that we have been doing this for over a dozen years, and we have been dealing with the Wild West, and we've been dealing with them, pulling them out of the ditches, and all the horror stories that we could share with you. It's because of all of those things that we've come to, here's how it's in compliance with the Book of Discipline, and don't do representatives, don't do this. This is why we recommend. It's all because of the other things didn't work, or they were out of Book of Discipline compliance. So that's why we've landed here, is because of all of that.
Yeah, and so for those that love flowcharts, here's the flow chart. Now, if you notice, you have Christ Recognition at the top. You have the church in charge conference, and that's the accountability. I was asked one, leadership boards, who they're accountable to? Well, we're all accountable to Jesus Christ, but also specifically they're accountable to the charge conference of the congregation. And nominations is separate, and they vote. And remember, leaders need to rotate, and superintendents, we got to make sure they rotate leadership. That's on us. They should be doing it, but we have to hold the feet to the fire on that. And you notice all these other committees, and not committees, all these other ministry teams, the nurture team, the worship team, the building maintenance team, the folks with tool belts, those all fall under the accountability of the pastor. And it'll be different in every church. It'll be the small group facilitator. It may be a staff member working with children's ministry, youth ministry. I mean, underneath that pastor will be different in every single church. But you notice when it comes to nominations, when you get your nominations report and you're looking at that as a DS, really in an SAS system, all you need is the leadership board and the nominations and a few other officers like, truth treasurer, those disciplinary officers. That's it. It's all one page. And we'll show you that page in a little bit. Hey, they can fit it all in. Because I tell you, Kay, I went to one church, 3,500 member church. I served, and we had like an 8-page nominations document when I got there, and I felt like, oh golly, it was just so much work.
Yep.
Trying to so-called fill slots. So we can select people and not elect them. And as superintendents, we don't have to get involved in that stuff. Get involved in the weeds of who's on the mission committee. I do have a question to ponder. Y'all think about this, and those that are watching the recording, take a moment and ponder this. Does your conference or cabinet have any policies or expectations for implementing simplified accountable structure? Do you have any guidelines for interpreting 247.2? Kay, do you have any answers to that? As we kind of think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we have been working with some districts and some conferences who are doing a district or conference-wide approach. And what we find is that consistency is really helpful. So imagine a pastor who is serving in District A gets reappointed to District B. And District Superintendent A has one interpretation of the Book of Discipline as it relates to SAS, and District Superintendent B has a different interpretation. And so they're like, what the heck? I thought SAS was SAS, but it isn't in that particular conference. Or lay leaders are having conversations, and it's like, what? I thought this was SAS. And so to have kind of we prefer a conference approach to this is how we interpret it here. So imagine when you are doing appointments, you don't have to worry about those different interpretations, or you have a new cabinet member roll on. It's like, okay, this is how we interpret simplified accountable structure, so that there's just consistency and language in the way it's rolled out. And so we're just all playing from the same game book. It's right. So helpful, so helpful.
Those of y'all that have read the book, like, golly, this thing's thick. Those of y'all that have read the book, notice we talk a lot about using guidelines in local churches. So you make a decision once, and then that's your guideline, and so you don't have to keep on making the same decision. As a superintendent, to know that, okay, here's our interpretation, here's our recommendation, here's our forms. I've made that decision once. Now, with 125 churches, I don't have to keep on making the decision and having the same conversation. I can say, here's the process, here's the guidelines, here's the implementation plan. Do this, and we'll be good.
Yeah.
And I don't have to keep on, recreating it every time. I ain't got time for that. And I know y'all don't. So that's one of our hopes is, ponder what that could look like for your conference. Now, as we move in now, I want to be really clear about 3 phases. Now, even in the last volume, we didn't talk much about this. Okay, I know you've had conversations coaching folks. I sat down coaching a pastor in the congregation. The pastor, let's see, he got there in July. In August, he wanted me to come by and tell him all about simplified structure and get me to approve it in time for an October charge conference.
Oh my.
And I said, oh no. After I went and talked to them, they were like, ooh, we gotta work. Yeah, there's some phases to this. So could you walk us, what we want to say, when you change, it's more than reducing the number of people. That's the easy part.
Yeah.
It's really the hard work is changing the conversation at the table. And that involves really changing the way we think about leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our 3rd edition that just came out of Mission Possible this summer, this is one of the newest things that we introduced because we were finding the scenario that Blake just shared was happening time and time again. And when we were approving those kinds of situations to occur, there was all sorts of distrust that was occurring, and they weren't well informed of what they were saying yes to. They were saying yes to simplification, but they weren't going in fully informed to accountability. They didn't know about guiding principles. I mean, it was not a good situation. So because of that, the book is even now arranged in these 3 phases and the timelines of how all of this works. So there are 3 phases: discerning, equipping, and implementing. And it's kind of like, you know what, if we skip any of these or rush any of these, it's not going to be a healthy approach. Again, learned over the years, it's war tested. So again, we recommend, so this is charge conference season. So if you have churches that you think might be thinking about it, when you're at charge conference this fall, you might just plant the little seed. If you are considering, or even the slightest hint of thinking about simplified accountable structure, then you will want to be discerning that in the first quarter of 2022 to move into it in 2023, right? So just set that expectation at charge conference this year so that they know they've got next year to prepare if that's what they're going to do. Don't call me in August of next year and think you're going to do it and move into simplified accountable structure in 2023. So discernment starts where we have this, there is a curiosity almost with the church. It's like, oh, we think we might be interested in this. And so a lot of times it starts as kind of this organic conversation. It could start in nominations, it could start in the council, it could start completely out of that. But it gets back to the council. And this is where a lot of times we're asking the council to really look at a SWOT analysis. All of these resources are in the book, by the way. What is the why that you are really thinking about going there? So it gets them past those technical reasons of fewer meetings and fewer people around the table. I mean, those are great initial reasons, but we're trying to get them to the missional why to understand the deeper reason for moving here. And then if they still like, oh, okay, we get why this is a deeper thing, a deeper conversation. And so, yes, we want to explore this. Then Blake has created like a consultation form, which helps when they come to you as a DS to say, okay, who's been in the conversation? Has this been like just one or two people? And what have the conversations been about? What is your why? So that you kind of understand the landscape as a DS of what's really been going on. Or is this like one pastor's wild hair to do it, or one lay person's wild hair to do this? What's been really going on here? And this is their request to explore. Do you get the difference? Request to explore, not, hey, we want to move to this. It's the request for the council to start exploring the model. So you can put the brakes on it before they really even get started in the discernment process, which is very different, right, Blake?
Before they get to town halls or anything, if you know,
Yeah.
we'll dig in, and actually we'll be showing you all these forms in just a second. But you know, the fact that we're splitting up consultation and approval should warm every DS's heart, just so you don't let the folks get ahead of you in the process. And because you know, and we'll talk about some good reasons why to say no, because there are.
Absolutely.
Okay, and you know, we split this up actually. I mean, golly, we opened it up into 12 steps because we knew, I mean, everyone loves a checklist, right? But you know, folks that are discerning, it's so easy to get excited and want to just jump ahead. So we laid out a 12-step roadmap, and it's in the book, and we kind of divided up the section by this. But this 12-step roadmap for discernment really allows the process to work itself through. And you notice we highlighted in red every time a DS was involved in something. And so you see, it's not just like at the end, it pops in throughout the system, even to have a church conference and a charge conference. We'll talk more about that in a second, but it really divvies out there. And I appreciate that so much. And in between, there's coaching, hopefully, and other ways to help the church be in a healthy place. You know, at the end of the day, they might not decide to do simplified accountable structure, but I do hope they start learning how to do accountable leadership well. And if all they get is accountable leadership out of this process, that is a 2 thumbs up success.
That's a big win. That's a big win. If
Yes.
more of our churches were doing accountable leadership, that in itself would be a big win.
Yep. So if you think about that discernment, you know, we tried to lay it out in a way that you as a superintendent could hand, here, here's the checklist, and really expect people to work that process one at a time. And that way, because you can't hover, you don't have the time for that. You can know if they follow this roadmap, they'll get in the right place. And that's what's helpful for that discernment. The next is equipping, Kay.
Yeah. So here's another place that we have seen a lot of leadership teams get into the ditch is where we haven't equipped nominations, right? I was talking about that a little bit earlier in thinking about leadership in a different way. Spiritual leaders as opposed to secular leaders. That's going to be an important piece. So training nominations between approval of the actual structure and the actual election of the leaders. And then the equipping is also of the new leadership board, initially and ongoing. This is a shift in how leaders lead churches. This is a deep cultural shift. And so a one and done kind of training is not going to be enough. So this is an ongoing commitment to accountable leadership, not just simplification, but accountable leadership training. So you're going to need to offer this at least once a year in your district so that we can really make this shift in leadership. So it's a non-negotiable. We just have to do that equipping and do it well for nominations and for the leadership board.
So, and one way to think about it is, okay, I do a January my job workshop every year, and this last year I did it via Zoom, like we're all are doing now. And I taught a staff parish class, and I got the conference treasurer to help me, and we did a trustees and finance class together. I had a separate class just for simplified accountable structure because of the complexity. And during the nominations class, I'll just tell you some hints there. I went ahead and taught the accountable leadership model for nominations, because even if they don't use the SAS system, they need to know how to think about nominations in a more holistic way, other than grabbing some pictorial directories and the dart throwing that Kay referred to. So I started teaching that stuff for everybody, kind of trying to raise expectations. But we could do that as part of our regular annual My Job stuff, and include it. And if you have a district and conference-wide approach, you're all using the same terminology, and that way, exotic versions don't take reign. And then of course we have implementing, and now, okay, you're talking about a whole year here, right?
Exactly. And just a side note, Blake, I so appreciate your distinction of SAS training, Simplified Accountable Structure training, separate than the traditional model. If we try to put those together, it messes people up. So thank you for saying that.
You have a staff parish, and you talk about how do you work with trustees and church council, and people start tuning you out because it's confusing. Nope.
So confusing.
It's your own class.
Yes. Thank you. So look at discerning and equipping is like year one. The beginning of the year is discerning. The end of the year is kind of equipping. And then year two is implementing. And so year two in the 2-year process of the 3 phases is the first year the new board is seated, starting on January 1 in the normal rhythm of the church. And so this is, and we recommend from the very beginning that a simplified accountable structure certified coach, and we've had about 150 now that have walked through our certification, so that we have shared language. And we have people that are kept up to date, not just trained and sent out, but like earlier today, we had our quarterly call. They have access to Blake's and my updated resources. Like when we update, they receive that update immediately. So we keep them up to date on the latest and greatest, because what we're finding is that, oh yeah, I've done simplified accountable structure at my church, I'll go and teach another, but they haven't been in any training or any updates for 3, 5, 7 years. And so we're perpetuating old information unless we have some certified folks out there. So we are suggesting that a SAS certified coach walk alongside the church in its first year. When we don't have that, we are seeing that churches don't have a strong start. We don't change the conversation at the table. All we're doing is bringing our old habits of the traditional structure into the new structure. The old agenda, the reporting, we haven't made the shift in the adaptive leadership. And the guiding principles don't get done, the leadership covenant. So all of those shifts that need to occur, usually without coaching, don't get made. The strategic ministry planning, that is the accountability for the pastor through the goals, doesn't normally get done. So this is the piece that is on the ground, help that church really lean into the model and have a really good, healthy start. That's the implementing.
Super. Well, and the other thing is, when we redesigned the book, we designed it in a way that implementing its own section, and it has things like, here's how to work a new agenda, or here's our January through December topics to focus on. So it's designed as a handbook to bring to the meeting. and it was because folks need the tools. So it just sort of patterns out your time together. So we tried to help committees not only switch and transition and understand the why, but also live into it on an ongoing, day in, day out and monthly meeting basis. So the next piece we're going to shift to is about DS approval. Again, near and dear to my heart, because I came, Arkansas Conference, we did not have a conference-wide approach. So the Wild West metaphor really exists for me. And as I said, 125 churches. I just moved to a new district from another district. I've been there 3 years, and it's like, oh, I just got those folks trained. I moved, and now I've got a whole new district with all these different versions they've inherited over the last, several decades of leadership models. Even down to, council on ministries, and then different versions of simplification and things they heard from across the country and said, "Ooh, good idea." So we're trying to get more consistency here. And one way we do consistency is have really clear approval points. The first one is the initial consultation early. And that's when we activate a coach. But the initial consultation says early, okay, and I've got a worksheet. I'll show you in a second on it. And then we have this DS approval, and that's when we convene a church conference only to consider the structure. Kay and I, in the latest version, we really talked about this, and we both said, it just doesn't feel right to have I do a district-wide charge conference, so there may be only 1 or 2 people voting, and it just did not feel good to have a board get together, have a new structure, have all the names for the new structure, and then bring it before a district-wide charge conference for approval. Legal, yes. Good idea, no. So we recommend convening a church conference to vote to change the structure, and then to have that separate charge conference for nominations. So here's your question to ponder. Think about, and because this will help, what's been your experience of churches requesting the flexibility of 247.2? And as you think about that, what worked well, what needs work, what you love about it, what still you need to learn about it. As you think about that, here's the form that we suggest. Is first, share that why, share the who's involved. Red flag for me, Kay, if all I see is the pastor's name and there's no laity involved in the lay structure and governance, that's like alarm bells that this is the pastor's structure, not the congregation's. Which committees are they wanting to get involved? And usually it's, just making sure here what their plan is. Now, they don't have to stick with it, but it helps me get an idea of where they are in the system. And then what's the timeline? Because if the timeline is, last month, we know we're going to have a challenge. So it helps me understand kind of, and I send this to them before I even have a phone call. I'll say, I'm not going to talk to you till you answer these questions, and then we'll talk.
Yeah. Wonderful. And that has set up expectations for them as well. And that I might even, when you even introduce, if you're interested in SAS like this fall charge conference, this could be one of the things, if you're interested, I have a form for you to consider before you give me a call, right? You could even put that out there. You could put that on your district website to say, hey, here's the consultation form for us to, before you ever call me.
Yeah. All right. Here's a slide I love. When to hit the brakes.
It's your favorite.
I know. I felt like this so many times. There are times to hit the brakes, and think about what's your red flags on this. And so, Kay, I have some. I know you have some. For me, if I know a pastor's about to change, and I can't tell them that, but I was like, this may not be quite the right year. That's the way I phrase that. That's a big one for me. What are some of yours?
Yeah. If they say, we're really interested in simplification, but I think we need to hold out our SPRC. Let's simplify everything but SPRC. There is an underlying issue of trust or control. And this is one of those things we've learned, Blake. We used to say, okay, right. So we'll get to that. We'll bring that in later. What we find is they never get to it because the underlying issue never got resolved. So don't go to the simplification until that underlying conflict trust issue is resolved. And so you always say it as SAS isn't the solution to a Matthew 18 problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's some conversations. Another one for me is the current pastor. Oh, golly, gifted, caring, maybe great preacher, but superintendent. I can look in the record and say, golly, this person has never led discernment process as well, or maybe they're really authoritarian in their format or something, and they're just not the right person to guide the congregation through this, because it's not going to be healthy. I'll say no. And the other thing is, I don't have to give a reason. I can just say no, or even better, not yet.
Yeah.
And now when I do say no, what I do always say is, but why don't you start on? And I say, why don't you start on, for example, go ahead and get a building maintenance team operating. And that way trustees don't go to their trustee meetings where they need to be talking about, like, Boy Scout litigation or legal issues or insurance with their tool belts on. Tool belt ministry is different than trustee ministry. We've conflated the two. So go ahead and do that. Go ahead and learn that. Start using guiding principles. Start moving into some of that. And then we'll have a conversation later about the actual structure.
Accountability. Hey, what about accountable leadership? Let's start that.
So those are some red flags you can kind of work on. And then there's a formal discernment. I have a separate page for that. I love worksheets. You have a separate page. Okay, here's your request. Here's the process we used. They can have the resolution. I'll just tell you, fourth year superintendent, I don't go to meetings where I haven't seen the resolution ahead of time. I say, I want a copy before I walk in the door, just so I can look at it, and if I need to hit the brakes on something. And then they request a church conference. And we're really clear. The church conference is about structure. The charge conference is about the slots, the names on the list. And keep those two separate, so we're not undermining what it means to actually do nominations, because you got to train a nominations committee on this stuff. So
they're not back to back, Blake.
Oh yeah,
they're not back to back, and there has to be room in between for the nominations to be equipped and to do their work in discernment. So this has just happened, is why it's fresh on my mind, is that okay, fine, I'll do the church conference reluctantly, because the DS is like, this is church conference season. That is not efficient to do that. And so had to really talk about building the trust, being transparent, why this is important. It's just once, right? We're not going to do this every year. And it's like, fine, okay, then I'll be back. Then I need my paperwork the day about the leaders. And then I've got to have, for the charge conference in 2 weeks. It's like, okay, but that doesn't help us with the nomination shift, and giving them time to do their work well. And so that's why having this partnership of the SAS coaches and the DSs, so that we all kind of understand this timeframes up front, is really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think that when we think about what the resolution should look like, we both tried avoiding this. We always thought, congregation need to do the work, but the fact is, this is pretty technical work to do this. And to keep it disciplinary, we provided a sample church conference resolution that, some paragraphs you need to scratch out, because, if you don't have childcare, doesn't apply, scratched out. But it gives, and it constitutes the new board, and is very clear that the other committees exist, but all those powers now go into that new board, and all the current classes then discontinue. The classes are, because there's still someone listed in trustees for 2 years from now, so you have to manage all that, and then really being clear that there's certain policies that they shall follow financial and building use, and all the church and charge conference policies, and then it has all those things, and this document also is good for if you need it for banks or things like that, proof that here's the board that has this authority is printed in the discipline. He'll cover all that territory. So that's a sample resolution for y'all to use, and it's in the book, And we just wanted to make that available because why recreate the wheel there, right?
Yeah.
Now,
It
Kay,
also, I was going to say, it also helps you clean up, like pulling in other like siloed committees like endowments and preschools, that kind of thing. I just want to reference it. We won't spend any time there. We went into that extensively in the book, but that does take care of those issues. And like, I haven't shared this with you, but another recent thing that has happened is the church, I had a church council approved to go to the structure, but they didn't approve to adopt the resolution at the church council meeting. So then we ended up, they had to then, it was kind of a two-step process at the church conference, right? And then people were upset that they hadn't seen the resolution ahead of time.
Sure.
So that was a little uncomfortable for some people. So the suggestion would be that that church council, when they make that formal approval or a formal request from the DS, that it is to approve that they call a church conference to approve the structure by means of this resolution, right? So it's all in one, and the resolution is part of that called church conference, and it could be shared ahead of time with the church members.
Oh, that's great, because we want transparency in this. That's the whole point of having a church conferences. There's a ton of daylight on this.
Yes.
Okay, so beyond that, I'll tell you, we switched in Arkansas a few years ago to having one of these forums. What has been your experience with conferences, and because you've been a lot of places around the country on this?
So those conferences that are still having churches in simplified accountable structure use the traditional forms. What we find is that those who are trying to fill out the forms, it's like, oh, are we doing this wrong? And so sometimes it gets them back into the old model, and then they start electing where they don't need to elect, and it kind of confuses them. So when we have separate forms, it's just so much slicker and cleaner, and it's like, oh, this is supposed to be more efficient. And so when we offer it, it is more efficient. And so are you in traditional, or are you in simplified accountable structure? And so there's kind of like this, if you're in traditional, this is your form. If you're in simplified, this is your form. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, and this is pretty much what we use in Arkansas. We actually have a cover sheet, and the cover sheet says it's a tick box. Do you use the traditional structure of committees? Do you use simplified? And then there's a little thing, are you interested in learning more about Simplified? And you can click that, and that gives me, oh, I need to have a conversation with you.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Kind of a heads up. But they choose one, and then it says, if you click this, then go to this page. Because it's trying to be really clear. And I think we're even including in our database, they're going to start adding that in as a clickable for our district admins, just so we can pull the records, because there's no good way right now in the system we use to just pull which churches are using which system.
Yeah.
So that's some of the plan behind that. And so I hope that's a helpful tool for you. Now, Kay, you created a lot of other resources. Could you share some of those with our friends before we have some Q&A?
Yeah. With your help, of course, we've created those. One of the things when we talk about accountability, there's sometimes a fear factor. It's like, okay, I get it, but I don't get it. And so one of the things that we did this summer, some of you may recognize some of those faces. Some of our good friends said, okay, we'll do some acting. And so this is a 9-member board with one missing, and an account and a pastor. And so we did a mock leadership board meeting and demonstrated what accountability looked like. There's accountability conversation of the pastor. There's an accountability conversation between peers. And then you can see that Blake and I did some narration of kind of unpacking the scenario. We gave some best practices and some not so good practices, but we did let you know which were which. And so that is out on the website. Just it's accessible, free of charge, just so there is an understanding and you can feel it, hear it, of what you're getting yourself into of accountability. Accountability is actually encouraging, supportive, it's being a cheerleader, it's very helpful. It's not punitive. It was never meant to be that way. And so sometimes we're afraid of it, but it really is a great tool when it's used well.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to offer that.
Yeah, we hear accountability, we call it blame, and it's not that at all. It's about living into God's mission here. So there's that one.
Yeah, we're really excited about this. Yeah. So Blake and I spent several hours recording this resource for DS Charm School. So if you're a new DS, it should be in your toolbox. But if not, Blake and I have also put it on our websites that you still have access to it, along with some resources. So if you just, from a DS perspective, if it's like, I would like to some deeper equipping around simplified accountable structure, you can go to either one of our websites and you have access to this, even if you're way out of Charm School, to take a deep dive. But it is through the lens of district superintendents. And again, some of these forms that we've been sharing, they're downloadable there as well. So we wanted to share that with you too. And then we also, not every conference has SAS coaches yet. So we also spent some time, we spent a lot of time on Zoom lately. Haven't we all? We did some on-demand equipping for nominations committees as well as leadership boards. So if you don't have those resources yet in your district or your conference, you can bring Blake and I without even paying for a plane ticket. And you can access an individual or for a church, and we'll walk those church teams through the equipping for both nominations and leadership boards. So that is an on-demand training that's available that you're welcome to share those links as well. They're on both of our websites. And then we have we've referred to this several times, but we have our next training for certified SAS coaches coming up on November 16th through 18th. So be looking for that as well. And I think we both referenced, this came out in July. It's now like a brick, but it has a adjudicatory section in it too. I don't know that we have told you that, but one of the brand new things we did is we added a adjudicatory section just for you. And 26 different resources. We added a resource section. So that's in there as well. And then the book is divided into the 3 phases. So we're really excited about this. It's probably the most comprehensive equipping tool yet for simplified accountable structure, but we just keep trying to make it easier and easier. Although Kevin tells us, I don't understand this whole, isn't this an oxymoron where you talk about simplified structure, but every time you rewrite it, it gets bigger, right? So
doubles every time.
Yeah,
Kevin,
I'm sure I didn't say that.
600 page.
exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited. I want to go back to the coaching. Okay, I'm really excited that's coming up. I'll say, superintendents, golly, we don't have time to walk every church through this. To know that there's a coach we're all using consistent language and they understand our interpretations of the discipline, they can get a lot of that legwork done. So that's not on your back. So anyway, but so all in all, everyone, thank you for the opportunity that we have to assist you in your ministry. We really, really are excited to be partners with you.
Absolutely.
Great, and I believe you have a webinar coming up for churches on October 14th on Simplified Accountable Structure. So that's at clergyeducation.com as well. Hey, we had a couple of questions come in. If you have a question for Blake or Kay or both of them, please send those in the questions area. A few people wanted to say hi to you, so I don't know if you saw that before they disappeared. They come and they go, but before they said, Carol wrote in and asked, isn't the Charge Conference the leadership board and the church conference the professing membership? So
Yes.
These are 2 different things, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. And so what we're saying is when we move to structure, we want the whole membership to have the opportunity to have their voice in the changeover of the structure. We feel that that's important.
Paul wrote in and asked if you all work with annual conferences to update SAS.
Just did this morning, didn't we, Blake?
Sure did.
Yes.
Yes, especially as we're trying to create consistent models. You know, being in a district, being in a conference, so we did kind of the Wild West. I've had to work with a lot of different models, and I'm just imagining with joy what it would be like to be in a conference where we have everyone's agreed, here's our system, we all train conference-wide on one system. You know, that consistency of terminology, it just makes translation work a lot easier. Yeah, so anything we can do to help conferences do this together and make it so those churches that this is right for.
We've been working with several that are doing a conference approach to Go ahead, Blake. I know you're freezing, but go ahead.
Kay, you and Blake were both freezing there for a moment.
Really lost
so yeah, we have you back though, Kay. So we'll do this next question without Blake, and he may pop back here in a moment. Okay. Blake was having some internet issues this morning. I know you recommend 9 members of the committee. What's the smallest effective size that you have seen?
9 is the bare minimum by book of discipline. We can't go any less, and we can't go any. 9 is like optimum. If you go more, then really you're going above the maximum for trustees and SPRC, right? And so if you get less than that, then you're not doing some minimum. And so we have just gotten to the point of saying that's the sweet spot. And we used to say, oh, here's a range. And again, it sounds like we're like getting too rigid, but it's just developed over best practices. And then when you look at all the different layers of the book of discipline, we feel like this is the sweet spot that covers all of the ranges of best practices and book of discipline compliance.
Yeah, Paul wrote back in, he asked a moment ago about your working with conferences, and he said, to be more specific, I mean with conference leadership and not individuals.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We met with a cabinet earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, that's all the questions I see. If you have a question for Kay or Blake or both of them, please leave them in up. I see another one coming just in. Do family members who don't live in the same households qualify to serve on the same leadership team?
Go ahead, Blake.
No. No.
I'm going to read that again so everybody who's out there can hear the question again. Do family members who don't live in the same household qualify to serve on the same leadership team?
Don't. I'm sorry. It would depend. I'll be really honest. I joke that I have some churches where everyone in the church has the same last name. You know, as superintendents, in all structures, we have to work with some stuff, and especially the edges, and especially in our incredibly small micro churches. I think we have to understand what we're dealing with and be really honest with that. But overall, I think, you know, the more we can stick to the processes and the clarity, just like any other staff parish committee rules, and the more you can just follow that and be consistent, the better. There's always going to be edge cases that make things complicated for us, but we don't write policy on the edge cases. We write policy on here's the best practice, here's what's disciplinary, and then as superintendent, I know sometimes we have to work around the edges when it comes to some complex situations.
And if I could add,
what would be considered a family under this situation?
I'm sorry.
What would be considered a family in this situation? Cousins, immediate family?
Well, it talks about household and immediate family, and so, you know, that's really what we work off there. But I'll say, you know, when we start looking at situation, if I have multiple generations of one family, multiple different households, but one family, and there's not any particular reason why, you know, it's not a micro church, I might be having some real questions how they're doing their nominations work. And I'd want to dig a little deeper on that, just to make sure they're doing a healthy nomination. So, you know, as you know, we've said before, you know, not everything can be solved out of simplified accountable structure. It's not a solving, it's a way to get towards better conversations and unleash more laity for ministry. But we need health in our governance systems, no matter what structure you use.
And the other thing that you just alluded to, Blake, if I could just take it a little bit further, is yeah, we talk about that immediate family, but sometimes churches that want to go to simplified accountable structure, it's like, oh, we don't have enough people to fulfill the traditional structure. And then they go, oh, well, we don't have enough people to fulfill the simplified accountable structure either. Then I think we miss an opportunity if we don't maybe talk about a different solution. Sometimes we use simplified accountable structure to avoid having the conversation we really need to have, saying, okay, if we don't even have enough people to fill simplified accountable structure, we shouldn't be talking about simplified accountable structure. We should be talking about, should we still remain chartered? Do we need to be thinking about merging with another church? We need to be thinking about a house church, a Fresh Expression, something else. Simplified accountable structure may not be the conversation we need to be having.
The way I'd use it is, we shouldn't be looking at 247. We should be looking at paragraph 213, the study of potential. Yes. And as superintendents, we have a lot of tools in our toolbox to activate. We can do the study of membership. I don't have all those paragraph numbers, but I know, they're in here. There's a study of membership. There's a financial study of a congregation where we can ask for some records and we can bring other people into the conversation. We have an enormous amount of tools in our toolbox that we never use. I'll admit to it. I've done 213 a million times. I did not know about some of these others until Kay was sharing with me. She was texting me some of these, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was in there. And I'm thinking, not every, we don't just have hammers and nails. We have a lot of different tools here. So let's use the full toolbox.
Yep. Got screws and screwdrivers too.
Yeah.
Blake, I'm chagrined that you don't have the book of discipline memorized as a district superintendent.
Well, they keep on changing it.
I thought they did that in district superintendent training. I thought they had a memorization course. Anything else? I don't see any other questions come in. Do you all have anything that you'd like to share before we call it a day?
Well, I just am so thankful for my DS colleagues and your ministry. I wish you so many prayers as you enter this season, and as we look ahead to all sorts of uncertainties and complexities, and as you coach congregations and partner with them, and just know that you're in my prayers.
Yeah, thank you. And I too appreciate that, the opportunity to share. And this really is a big part of Blake's and my ministry. And we come from a place of really trying to develop the tools at the local church level, but also the tools to partner with you as district superintendents, because we know you're the approval process and the ones that continuously look at these every year at charge conference season. So we see as partners, that's why we offer this forum 3 or 4 times a year, is to come alongside you and answer your questions and provide those resources and trainings for you so that maybe it's a little easier for your ministry when it comes to simplified accountable structure. So we just so appreciate the opportunity to be in ministry alongside you. And we appreciate
We did receive a yes or no question just now. So let me read that to you, and you can each give us a quick answer. Is it advisable to ask a member who just turned 18 to serve as chair of the SAS church leadership?
It depends on their spiritual maturity.
Remember, if you would select that same person to be your staff parish chair, your trustee chair, your church council chair, I've got a 19-year-old and I love her. I can't imagine her wanting to do those jobs. I would suggest everyone that you look at, you want to make sure they have a history of leadership and ministry. Have these people shown leadership as a small group leader? Have they led mission trips or local missions? How have they led, and have a good background on their Christian leadership? Notice I did not say, oh, whatever, they're secular. We really want to see their Christian leadership before we put them on the team, much less the chair.
Paul said that he asked this question because there was a church who had all the leaders were in their late ages and they needed a good leader. So I suspect their other option was an 18-year-old.
Well, that'd be fascinating.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible 4, I see it now. I was with a group last night. I'm doing webinars all the time. And I was with a group last night, and I was telling them about a book that we did. It's called Understanding Jesus in the 21st Century. And when the author sent it in, it was 700 pages. And I said, you know, I had to work with him to get that thing down to 200 pages. So maybe we'll work really hard next time and keep you all within 400.
There we go.
Oh, not 600. We can't double again, Kevin.
100 for each version. When you get up to version 6, we'll be at 6.
Okay. All right.
Hey,
All right.
thank you all. So thank you everyone that joined us today. We're really glad you're here. And thanks everyone who's watching this recording. I know we have a lot of folks who are going to be watching the recording later. It's really good to have you here. Blake and Kay are wonderful to work with. They just really are. I've enjoyed working with them so much on their books, and it's just fun to be with them. Any last words from you guys?
Just appreciate it. Thank you. We appreciate you too,
Everybody
Kevin,
have a good-
for putting up with us.
Thank you. Everybody have a great rest of your day, great rest of your weekend, and we will catch you next time.
Bye, y'all.